Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am your host, Florence Adichie, coming to you from a sunny afternoon in Accra, Ghana. And my guest is coming to us from a sunny afternoon in a neighboring country, which he'll tell you about. So let's get right into it. He is a writer and co-founder of Narrative Landscape Press Limited, a firm that believes that owning the means of production is essential to a vibrant publishing industry. They're committed to more than simply printing physical books. They also bring editorial and book design expertise to the fore while developing a cadre of excellent writers. His second novel, Fine Boys, a coming-of-age novel, received wide acclaim in 2012 and was published in America by the Ohio University Press's Modern African Writer Series in 2021. When he's not writing or publishing, he teaches creative writing at the annual Chimamanda Adichie Creative Writing Workshop. Prior to launching into his literary career, he graduated with a medical degree from the University of Benin. Dr. Eghosa Imasuen, welcome to the podcast.
See, I told you you'd pronounce it well. Clap for our audience.
Clap, yay.
It's lovely to be here. Lagos is
Yes.
Lagosing, so we're all hiding from traffic until closing time. So this is just perfect. In about an hour, I go home.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So let's get started. Where are you from? Where are you local? And what is your craft?
I'm a former medical doctor from Benin City. The city, not the country. The city, the country is named after. I grew up in Warri, which is a nearby coastal town, which used to be called the Oil City, although the refinery is no longer working. I moved to Lagos in 2013, where I now live and work.
And what is your craft?
I'm a publisher. I'm a writer, short stories and novels, although I haven't done either of the last two in a long time because publishing is this soul-destroying work. Reading submissions, it takes so much out of you. Yes, but
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
But that's what I do. I'm not one of those who was always a writer, who was always a reader, who always knew they were going to be a writer. I was aware that I was brilliant because I think my parents always used that to tease me. I was the big coconut head who always read pieces of paper and everything, but I never really wrote until 2005. You know what I mean by that child now, who, when him and his mom are in the market, he will pick up a piece of torn paper from the ground and start reading it, and who is 4 or 5 or 6, and everybody is worried and scared, or who walks into the meetings of mommy and her auntie friends and starts talking about 1984 Olympics and how satellite television works. And my mom and her friends were staring at me like, what the hell do they have here? But I think I found out that writing was a thing in 2005. I was already 5 years a doctor, and I just jumped into it. And 5 years later, I was no longer practicing. Of course, then I had to find a gig because writing doesn't really pay, and I found myself publishing.
So what kind of medicine did you practice?
Didn't go that far. General practice. Yeah.
Okay.
General practice. Finished medical school in 1999 into the new millennium. First exam I ever failed in my life was the primaries to become a surgical resident.
Oh, wow.
I was shocked at the exam. I was so upset by it. I was like, what the hell is this? What? So I found out that professional exams were not a test of knowledge. They were more of a gauntlet, because there were so many people trying
weeders,
There were so many people trying to get into the residency programs when we finished medical school at that time, because it had become more attractive because the government was pushing a lot of money into it, unlike the 80s when most people went into private practice. That the exams were no longer testing knowledge. It was about not an excuse, but I just kind of rebelled against it. I just said, no, this is ridiculous. And of course, most people rebelled by moving abroad. That's why Nigeria kept on hemorrhaging doctors. Then several of us once I found a second love in writing, and I found that it was something that I was really good at, medicine just stopped. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So you were this brilliant child that your parents could barely stop you from picking up papers to read all the time. So first of all, how did you find medicine as the place where you landed first? And then how did you transition out of that kind of scientific self into the writing? Because, when you think about most African parents, they want a doctor. That's part of probably
Yeah.
why you maybe even did it. But then when you decided to be a creative, how did that move? So doctor to creative.
So I'm first son, first child.
Okay.
And my dad was an engineer who had a reputation for being really, really good in school. He got what they call it 112 in Mama Phi, maths, additional mathematics and physics when he did his A levels. So it was kind of brilliant. My mom was supposed to study medicine, but got into pharmacology. And eventually she got tired of pharmacology and studied law, and she retired as a chief magistrate about a decade ago. So it was that kind of house. My siblings, my three siblings, my immediate younger one studied mechanical engineering. That's Nosa, the boy. Then my sister studied math and she's an oil trader in the UK. Then the last born studied medicine. So it was that kind of house. So for me, I always was a science student. I didn't have the liberty of thinking I could do arts. I was always into volumes. Now, I hated math, to be fair. I passed it, I understood it, but I didn't enjoy it. And I read volumes. So biological sciences are just stories. Biology is stories. You tell a good enough story and you see a pattern and you explain it. And it was a beauty. I love biology. I got a distinction in secondary school biology, and medicine was just natural. But even then, my mom was saying, "Oh, you could study law, you could study anything you want to." Because I did literature in school, unlike most people who were in science class. My dad insisted that all his kids do literature. He hated geography, felt that geography was something you could study anytime in life. He didn't know why it was taught in school. But he said literature, if you missed literature in school, you missed an entire world, a way of. So all of us, even my brother that was in engineering class, had to study literature. And each of the four of us broke the timetable in each of our schools because there was no allowance for it. But so I would have to miss a technical drawing class, an engineering drawing class every week because I had to take a literature class and all that. It happened to my sister, it happened to my brother, it happened to our last. And so I just met and I love practice, to be honest. Now, most people tell you, no, I actually really liked it. I love practice. What is medicine if not listening to stories and coming up with an explanation for them? And of course, medicine is actually apprenticeship based. What you study in school is just to prevent you from killing people, but to actually heal people is what you learn on the shoulder of another older doctor. That's what the practice is like in practice in real life. Apart from the research people who go and work in an office, but dealing with people, you are apprenticed to somebody older. So I love the practice of medicine. Did it become less satisfying because of the issues in Nigeria at that time? Yes, it did. How did I jump into writing again? My mom. So I was 5 years post-graduation. I had attempted primaries in surgery once. I had stopped even attempting anything. So she came to see me once in my flat where I was living in Warri. And we got into these conversations like we always do, because I'm the one who is her first child and I look exactly like her. And so I'm a second lover. So she takes special interest in my matter. So she was like, you have become a chloroquine and Panadol doctor. You're not moving on. You're supposed to be doing more with your life. I'm like, Mom is 25 years old. No, pushing 30. I've never dragged you to a police station to go and bail me for a crime or anything. I've always been a good child. I did all my duty. I passed my exams. Please let me rest. I got into university at 16. I graduated at 24. Even though there were 2 years strike, I should have graduated at 22 as a doctor and all that. So I was kind of a bit irresponsibly witty in my answer. So I think finally, she now pulled up a magazine and she was looking at this. It was John Vieve, and there was this girl on the cover who had braids and 2 beads in each weave and in each braid. And she was saying, "Look at this girl that they're praising on Genevieve magazine. She has written a book on horticulture, on flowers." And I looked at it. It was a book titled Purple Hibiscus. And she was like, "Why can't you be like her?" So I said, then she said, "Why can't you teach lesson or talk to?" I see the way you talk to your friends. You're always holding court. I said, "Mommy, lesson for children. That's okay. Why don't you write?" She just said it in passing. "Why don't you write?" And I said, okay, cool. There's certain stories I always wanted to tell. So I went to my dad. He had this bank of computers for his business. And the family owned a mortgage bank at the time. So I went there and I just took one. Forgot to take a UPS, which is an uninterrupted power supply, which is like a small battery that prevents you from when the electricity goes out. So the electric company became my editor because anytime they struck, I lost about 5 minutes of writing because I had to reduce my auto saving from 10 minutes, which
Yeah.
to Microsoft. I reduced it to 5 minutes. And I
Yeah.
and I started writing a story about my first novel, which is this bad science fiction novel, alternate history about speculative fiction about a Nigeria in which one of our presidents who was assassinated in '76 survived the assassination attempt, and it's 2003 in this alternate Nigeria. And I wanted to examine certain crimes he was accused of committing during our civil war. There was some genocidal there was something that happened in Asaba in early 67, in the first early months of the war. And this gentleman, Murtala Mohammed, who would basically die a hero at the age of 38, 6 years later, was was implicated. And I was dealing with the themes of, you either die young as a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And also, I wanted to tell a police procedural, but I couldn't create a world in which the Nigerian police actually investigated crimes using, the tactics of that you watch in the film. So I had to create this new Nigeria where everything went right, and there were trams in the cities, and there was the subways in Lagos and all that jazz. So while I was writing, I eventually traveled to Lagos in 2005, and I bought a copy of Popular Hibiscus. It wasn't about flowers.
No, it's not.
and I read it, and I was when I tell people that Popular Hibiscus made me a writer, they don't understand it. It wasn't for me. It was, first of all, it was the simplicity of it, which is extremely difficult to do, and it was also I'd studied literature in secondary school, so in my understanding, contemporary African literature was Chinua Achebe, Soyinka, and those guys. There was a silent generation after them, whose books had not yet become canon. So I read Chinua Achebe, and I found out that these stories were 30 years removed from me at the very least, or 100 years removed. There were stories of immediate post-colonial period, after colonialism came in the 1890s, and there were also immediate post-independence period, 1960s, and I couldn't. That is the books in school. Like I understood their importance. I knew why they were important, but they were not me. You found yourself, all your young adult life, like reading American pop, reading John Grisham and everything, and feeling closer to those stories than your stories. But with Popular Hibiscus, I knew Kambili, I knew the dad, I knew that mom, I knew them. I lived next to those people. I knew those stories. I knew the damage. I knew the pain of disappointment of parents who were brought up, who were boomers, basically, and who had given birth to us, and who were seeing the disaster that post-independence actually was. I knew that story. So I went home, read it all through the drive, started it at night, didn't sleep that night, continued it and finished it around 4 p.m. just as I was entering Warri from Lagos on the bus. Got to my computer, deleted my entire first draft, and started again. In the coming years, I would become friends with Chimamanda, and I would eventually publish her, and I would end up teaching at her workshop. I attended it first, and she always said that I was the ITK, that's I too no child, in her workshop. I'm a year older, this silly woman, but she was always, I was the one who always had his hands up and always had an answer to every question. I was basically became the class captain. So we became friends, and we found out that our stories were basically the same.
Yeah.
Only that she was bold enough and lucky enough and had parents who were, maybe she wasn't firstborn, so there was nothing on her shoulder, and she was able to leave medicine first for pharmacy for a few months, then eventually to go to the US around the time when the pro-democracy riots were happening and all the universities were closed down, 96, 97. She was able to leave. We stayed back, lost a year, lost 2 years in school and graduated. But the journeys always eventually took you back to a place where, if Nigeria had not really pushed hard for STEM education in the 70s by trying to push anybody who showed a modicum of brilliance, of ability, was pushed into science. That was how we all ended up there. Anybody who showed just a modicum of ability, no matter what their strengths actually were, you were pushed into science. So for me, it wasn't as though I would not have loved medicine. I really loved it. I really liked it. It was easy, it was steady work, it was a steady salary, and you were loved by patients, and you basically just performed for patients, which is what it was. You know, you spoke to people. It was social, even though you studied science, and it was deep, deep science. But you became a kind of what's that word I'm looking for? An interface between the book and the person, you know, and the reality. But writing was just so much easier. If I may expose all writers who claim it is hard, it's not that hard. So it was just so much easier, and yeah. So that's how it happened. So I remember when I took my first novel to my dad when I was still practicing, and I showed it to him, and it was like this mean dude. It was like, I always knew you were going to write. Thank you, my son. Thank you. And it was the second time he had said thank you. The first time he said thank you with that tone of voice was when he came for my swearing in. It was deaf. My mom couldn't come, but it was there for my swearing in. And when I took up and I was sworn as a doctor and I came there, you know, it's supposed to be this big occasion. I came there. When I walked past him, he held me and said, "Thank you, Sonny. Thank you." And that was so cool, you know. So that was the second time I did it. Once when I became a doctor, second when I became a writer, the two times that my dad thanked me for not disgracing him. So it just happened.
And for your brilliance, obviously. Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's a very interesting. So what was the title of your first novel?
That one that we don't talk about. Okay. It was titled To St. Patrick.
Okay.
You know St. Patrick is the patron saint of Nigeria.
Okay.
And one of the massacres in Asaba in October 7th of 1967 occurred at St. Patrick's College. So it was just like a way to hint at that and one of those things where I only knew about it because of my mother's own history with the war. My mother's dad was from the Midwest, was a Shekiri, but he was a policeman, but he had most of his a large chunk of his professional life. He was the provincial police officer for an eastern district, which was in the east, the province that eventually, the region that tried to leave the federation at that time. And when an army from the east invaded the Midwest and declared the Republic of Benin, that's of the Midwest, my granddad stayed at his post and was named Commissioner of Police. So eventually, when the Nigerian army pushed back the rebels, my granddad was on a hit list as one of as an Igbo sympathizer, as a traitor to Nigeria. Of course, he survived that by running to Lagos and presenting himself, where he was thrown in jail. So my mom then was in the East. She had been expelled in retaliation, when the Easterners ran back to the East after the massacres in the North in 1966, in the months preceding the war. The Eastern military governor had said that if Nigeria cannot guarantee the safety of Easterners in other regions, then the East cannot guarantee the safety of Nigerians. So he had basically expelled non-Easterners. And even though my mom, while being a Midwesterner, she had an Eastern scholarship because she was actually the child no book at that time. So she eventually, but what she remembers was when she was put in a new Catholic school in Benin City, one of her friends was called out in October. And by the time the friend came, the friend was shouting and screaming, and they were holding her, and she was broken. And what had happened was that our father and two of our brothers had been killed the day before, 2 days before, in Asaba, in the Asaba massacre. So it was a story that I knew about. But I'll say, but it was this gentleman that the mama said, yeah, it was the one. But his face is on the 20 naira note. My mom said, yes, his face is on the 20 naira note. And when he was assassinated and you were 7 months pregnant, you marched in protest against the coup plotters who killed him in 1976. Yes, my mom, yeah, he was a hero. But he also tried to kill your dad. He said, yeah, the world is complicated. So
it is that. Wise words.
So I've always, exactly. So it was that kind of, it was that kind of, that's our history merged into a family. So I always knew, even though most people don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Most people don't know about Asaba. So that was what the first novel was about. It was ambitious for the amount of skill I had at the time.
Sure.
I wish I could do it again. And my partner Willie is always teasing me that shut up and do it again. And I think now that my hand is a bit stronger, I think I might do it again. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you know all Nigerian authors, but I think African science fiction has so much of a role in transforming Africa. I mean, I'm a voracious reader, so I read so much, and I read a lot of Nigerian authors, but particularly those that imagine an Africa that's very different. So what you just imagine about trains and all those things, like, people can see it, and technology will ask people to be for avatars, but the words that are around the emotions that are what you're trying to create, I think it's time and it's necessary. So speaking of, who are some of the authors that you would say are authors to watch, and or probably more appropriately, how do you go about choosing authors to publish?
For us, it's about it's difficult to explain, but there's this. It's not so much as craft as it is originality is such a bad word, but I think that's the closest to it. And truth. There's a softness that comes from truth, where for me it's empathy. Yeah, that's it. See, I'm trying to find the answer while I
Yeah,
should have
sure,
prepared before coming here, but it's about empathy. There's a way a story is told where you know that this writer feels for the people he's writing for. One of the tragedies is that empathy seems to lean left in its political values because people tend to understand others' point of view instead of protecting themselves from hurt, which tends to be a right-wing thing. And it's one of those tragedies where we are now accused of being liberal. No, it's just empathy. And
Yeah.
and there's a way a story is told where the author feels each person's pain, even that of the villains. And for me, that is normally where I see the best writing. And one other thing I do when it comes to now, this is not this is just pure craft, is also the ability to do the simple things. So somebody who sends you the first 3,000 words, sends you a query letter that is 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph explaining why they are contacting, the second paragraph about the book, the third paragraph why they are the best person. The manuscript sample is double spaced, left justified only, Korean new, monospace fonts. And the person just does everything well. Most times, their writing is good.
Okay.
Now, the madman who now comes and says, well, it doesn't matter, it's the work that matters, and breaks the rules. And you're like, and you yourself are like, yeah, you being empathetic. And I say, yeah, it's true. What, these rules don't mean anything anyway. Let me even see this person's writing. You would have wasted an hour or 2 hours of your time.
Going.
Most times it is bad. Or the person who says that this my book is going to be the best book and it will win an award. No, most times it is bad. Or the person who showed a red flag. There was one, the person sent us, not the manuscript in Microsoft Word, but sent us scanned pages of their manuscript, each page stamped by the Nigerian Copyright Commission.
Okay.
Yes, you heard it well. Exactly what you heard. Each page stamped by because he didn't want his story to be stolen.
Okay.
You get, and most times it shows a very, very poor apprehension of your own writing.
Sure.
And also to say, with my story, to understand that stories are never really stolen. Every story has been told.
Right. Exactly.
And why would a publisher risk their entire reputation on that?
Exactly. Exactly.
So now those are red flags. Not the real question, but I just had to put that out there. But in terms of people that you should look out for, there's this gentleman called David Hymer, who writes in Nigerian English. Hymer, Hymar. David Hymer is deaf. Is hearing disabled, which is the proper way. God help. Okay, thank God he can't even hear this, so I'm happy. So he will kill me for that because he has a lovely sense of humor, and he writes unashamedly in Nigerian English, which is he writes the way I'm speaking. And you know the way Nigerians speak, we're like pa, 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 and people like Ghanaians say, "Oh, but I love your pidgin." Yes, that's the way he writes. And he has this memoir.
Okay, so let me ask you. So he's hearing impaired. So how does he get the meter of speech? Was he once?
No, he could hear before. Yeah.
Okay.
He slowly lost it.
I see. Okay, got it.
Slowly lost it, and so he reads lips now.
Okay, got
he reads lips now. But like I told him, but you got a hearing aid. He said no, it was hell.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah,
because it was just noise because his was nerve damage, not so much as conduction damage. It was just noise. So maybe like a cochlear implant eventually when he has money, that might help him. So when we came to sign the deal, so it's always if David is talking to you, Hymer is talking to you, and he's a bodybuilder and he's this fit and tatted up to the gills, and he's a star in the making,
Okay.
And he's also too aware that he's handsome, which is a problem. He's too aware of that. But his writing is so irreverent, and so there's Hymer. Then of course, how can I call Oyeko Braithwaite a foundling. She's already big. Our first novel, My Sister the Serial Killer, was this
Oh yeah. 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 Yeah.
playful, silly book that is so well done. And you're like, and you are reading it and you are repeating to yourself, it's an easy read, it's a very hard write. An easy read is a because there's no other way to justify how easy it seems. Yeah, so there are lots of people creating now who are very excited by this. This gentleman of Indian descent who lived in Kenya for many years. He's moved to the States now. He was in fintech, although he's a lawyer. As we all are, you have to wear many caps. And we published his first novel, Truth is a Flightless Bird, which is a crime thriller set in Nairobi. Yes, the title is so cool, yeah? Truth is a Flightless Bird. Basically, a play on the idea that a lie has gone around the world twice while the truth is still putting on his trousers. So is this
Exactly.
yes? So is this crime story set in Nairobi around the time of Obama's visit? And it's I remember when we got the manuscript, I was like, oh God, it's a Kenyan. And I saw him. I saw it was Indian, and I was worried about how it would seem if he missed, characterization and the gaze. One of the problems we have here. So I had to send it to one of my very African friends who lives in the States. Everybody has that friend now who is very aware of the politics and who also writes. So I sent it to a friend of mine, Kelechi, who eventually founded the publishing house and is publishing the American edition.
Oh, nice.
So he read it and it was like, okay, no, Agba cannot notice this about black people. This is staring. This is so he basically annotated the manuscript
Okay. Okay.
and made it politics proof, which was really cool. Yeah, so there are so many silly things, but yeah, there's a lot of good writing going on.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah. I can
also
imagine.
a lot of so you have most of the people being published by Masobe Books, Masobe. It's a rival of ours. I always tease its founder that I hate him because he's doing so much work. I'm like, God, wow, Tuki, where did you think of God? I hate you. God, I don't want to see you. I'm so
Yeah.
jealous of him.
Yeah.
It's basically he's captured a cadre. We're in competition with him for writers, and he's captured a cadre of writers that are the next big thing. He published the collection of short stories. Nearly all the men in Lagos are mad. He published a friend of ours, which is a beautiful people's playlist, which is basically each story is themed to an R&B song from our generation, from the 90s and noughties, and it's so well done. And yeah, so it's the kind of work that he's doing. So Masobe is putting out a lot of great stuff. I like each time I read anything that Writers Project Ghana puts out, there's always a short story that I'm really excited by, at least in Ghana. Then of course, by the time you go to Liberia, Sierra Leone, so we are always looking for that voice, especially for coastal West Africa. I personally am looking for that interface between 600 years of European contact and our people. So I'm looking for people who recognize that so much was damaged and changed. Just to look at people who are formed by that, because that's how my people were formed. The Benin or the Edo. When you read about the Benin expedition, that's the Benin massacre of 1897. The picture in your head from watching films about what happened in Zululand is people in spears fighting people with rifles at Roke's Drift. But the Benin was rifle against rifle. The Benin have been armed by the Portuguese since the 1500s. They became a slave trading empire, although they now stopped the slave trade really early before other sub-Saharan kingdoms because they found out that it was decimating farming communities. And what turned the scale, Benin had cannon, the Shekris had cannon. I think even the Ashanti had cannon when they fought the British. Both sides were armed, but what the British had was the water-cooled machine gun. That's what turned the tides. But most of the stories simplify those complications. The complications of how the Yoruba Civil Wars from the 1780s to from the 1790s to the 1860s basically fed the last cohort of slaves to the West Indies, or what happened with in Ghana in the wars that fed the last, and how the most successful kingdoms, their gods didn't travel. So you look at the world, you have the Orishas, you have the gods, you have Amadioha and everything. But the gods of the slavers, the people who succeeded, their gods didn't travel. Their gods stayed back in West Africa. There's so much you can do with those stories. And I like people who recognize those opportunities, who recognize the complicatedness of dealing with the diaspora, dealing with the resentments and the pain. And also, for like in Nigeria, you can actually go back and know who the slave trading families were. The records were never lost. Know them. They eventually segued into palm oil, but you kind of know them. And we had another trauma in West Africa, in Nigeria specifically, because the war kind of was a break in transmission that kind of destroyed what happened before 1970. So for us, that is kind of lost. Those old stories are lost because most of them lost everything in the war, because a lot of them were from the southeast, some Lagos and the coast. Yeah, but it's those are kind of stories, that kind of things that I've always been interested in. So we're really interested in stories from across the continent, but specifically across our part of it. And we're also trying to get into translation into Francophone, Lusophone, other types of storytelling. Yeah.
Awesome. So you kind of answered my why the where question about, how you came to be living and working and playing where you currently are. But tell us a little bit more about your Lagos. Lagos is a vast town. So tell us about your why the where in Lagos.
Oh, yeah. So I live on the mainland, quite close to the airport.
Okay.
My entire family, at least those who moved to Lagos, they live on the island. My mom's younger sisters, my cousins, they live close to the business district. So when I was moving, I decided that I would live as far away from them as possible. I love them, but they are too much. And I said I would stay close to the mainland. And I think one other reason was I just wanted to be close to the airport, and I wanted to be close to the bus park. So anytime I wanted to go back home to Warri or Benin, it wouldn't be hard. But the tragedy is that my house is now the halfway house for the entire family. So anybody who is...
Of course, everyone traveling, we stop you there.
Anybody's traveling with it, they're like, hey, yo, I say, what? I say, my flight is 5 a.m. Can I come and crash in your house? I'm like, what? So, yeah. So,
exactly.
So I'm back to being first son. My brother is traveling, he comes, he's coming back, he comes. So I live on the mainland. Luckily, I was able to get an office close to my house. That is what Lagos is really about. It's about building your own bubble where you can be protected and you can protect those that you care for. That is my Lagos. It's one of... I'm still a nerd at heart. You can see from the way I can be effusive about really quirky stuff. And so I'm the homebody. I'm the person who will say, oh, there's a book launch happening, or there's a book event happening. And I'm the person 2 minutes to say, hey, are we still going for this thing, which is code for, can I stay home? So that's my Lagos. But when I'm dragged out, it's always fun to be around other creatives, and of course to be around my old doctor classmates, those of them who still remain, or again halfway house when they travel down from the States or from the UK or from Jamaica or from Bahamas, wherever they're practicing medicine. Everybody drops by Eghosa's house. So I've become like a landlord of Lagos in a way. It's It's the last since 2013 when I moved here. I was here much earlier. I practiced medicine here much earlier in 2003. But in the last decade, it's been fun. It's heartbreaking to have to leave Warri and Benin because of the economic. Nigeria is becoming a single city state, a single city federation, because everything is now in Lagos, and the other capitals of commerce are shrinking while everybody's moving. So, but I guess that's survival of the fittest city. But we still pretend to be Warri boys. Basically they tell you that Nigerian comedy is Warri. So if you see a Nigerian comedy, if you see Nigerian stand-up is Warri. The accents, the jokes, the patterns, the cadence, that's where I'm from. That's why I tell the group. So like now I've been code switching throughout this entire interview so your listeners can understand the English that I'm speaking. Because if I change, I'm going to know yet what I talk at all, which I just did. So because if I change it, nobody will hear a thing that I say. Yeah. So that's it.
Right. So that's a good transition into my Glocal speak question. So we want to hear what you hear. So it's a word, a phrase, or a saying that is a meaningful part of your Glocal experience and how, or local experience, and how you've come to value it as a Glocal speak. So what are some phrases or words that ring in your ears?
They're not a chopper block belefu.
Okay. Translation.
Which means that you people then do not eat frozen water and claim that they've eaten a full meal.
Okay.
Another one is, this one is a bit risque. Now where short my hand reach 9 day hangy pants. Which I guess you understand. Because I think our pidgin is close enough for you to get that. Do I need? Okay, let me explain
Yeah.
it to the Glocal audience, which means that
Yes, exactly.
um, the height, the height of a man limits where how high he can hang his underpants, which means in pidgin English, not do past yourself or don't do more than your capacity. You can only do your best, and your best is what you can only do, and your best is only what you can do. Yeah, so I can't think of any. It's just
Yeah, but no, those are great. Those are, yeah, I'm sure that often heard and it's a definite part
exactly.
of your everyday life. Nice. Okay, so you started writing, you had your first experience and then you had a novel that had some critical acclaim. So
Yeah.
tell us about that first writing experience, your process of putting together Fine Boys.
Okay, so Fine Bus was the second experience. So I found out that once I finished with To St. Patrick, Purple Hibiscus was still nagging at my mind, and I wanted to write. I didn't think of it this way at that time, but what are writers if not bullshitters? So this is the legend that has been created, that I've created around it, and I think it makes sense. So I was Purple Hibiscus touched me in a way that I knew that I would be working on a spiritual sequel to it, which is basically not the same characters, but the same archetype, the same people 10 years on. So Fine Birth was about that generation of people, and they are in university. Now, Fine Boys was the name that Nigeria had this problem with university gangs. They were called secret cults or confraternities. They became very violent. I think even now one of them has become a criminal organization in Europe called the Black Axe. Arrived there on the back of Nigerian immigrants to Italy, and I hear that they've been doing deals with La Cosa Nostra and the Naples
Oh, yeah, I've
gangs.
heard of
Yeah.
that.
So the Black Axe was one of the confraternities in Nigeria, and most of them were all sea themed. They were all sea based. So I wanted to tell a story about my experiences in school in and around them, but also larger about just the experience of our people. So, and I wrote Fine Boys. For a long time, I would deny that it wasn't autobiographical, but yeah, it's been a decade. It is semi autobiographical. A friend of mine was stabbed to death and died in my arms. He wasn't stabbed in front of me, but he died in my arms, and literally, not figuratively. And so the story was a novel to him and his memory, and how silly the whole violence was. And it was also speaking to the idea that associations and unions, they tend to work for the first generation of founders, and eventually they lose their power over time. So, for example, the first fraternity, the first confraternity, Pirates, was founded by non-conformists. One of their first leaders was Captain Blood, who is Wole Soyinka, and there were people like that. They founded it in the late 50s, in 1958, and so by the 1970s, it was already becoming decayed, because the half life of a university career is 2 years. So things happen much quicker, unlike the general public, and it's like a snapshot of how quickly life can change. So by 1970, in the 1970s, they broke it. This part broke out, and they called themselves the Buccaneers. In Benin, another part broke out, faction, and they called themselves the Black Axe. In University of Port Harcourt, a faction broke out. They called themselves the Vikings, and that was how it kind of and that's how it all broke out. So the Mafite, named after the Black Stone, and then of course, then the Mafia, which was based on Godfather. Then there was even one very weird one. I think it was the KKK, that only mixed race guys could join. Yeah, you heard that right. Then there was the Jezebels, which was a sorority that formed in response to the violence to protect girls. And then there was the Black Braziers or the Black Bras, another sorority. So by the 90s, this thing was all, and to conform was to join a confraternity. So the non-conformists were those of us who now refused the confraternities. We were the nerds and the geeks, and you see the classes, you see an American university archetype or schools, you see the college, you see the jocks, you see the people, you see the science club. We were the nerds, the kind of weird people who never joined anything and were just kind of just hanging out. And which means that we would have been the ones to have formed the confraternity in the 50s. And you see that at times even with national associations like the Nigerian Association of Nigerian Writers, or you see it with ANA, or you see it with the Ghanaian Writers Association, where after a while, the juice is lost because administrative people eventually run and take over the association. But the brilliant people who would have founded it have no time for it because writers write. You see
Right.
in many
Yeah.
situations. So that was one of the things I wanted. Those are some of the themes that I engaged with. The writing of it was pretty straightforward. It's what I have done with both books, and I think it works for me. A character Bible where I just have my characters and I start writing quirks and characteristics, and I put that away and forget it. Then a plot outline where I know the ending. I always have to know the
Yeah.
ending. I
Yeah.
do not know the journey there, but I know the ending.
Yeah.
Then I start drafting. Then I now write a details outline for the first three chapters. I write chapter 1 and 2, then stop, then go and revise the outline for chapter 2. No, I revise the outline for chapter 3. Now that I've written 1 and 2, then I write 4 and 5. Then I write those 3 and 4. Then I revise the outline for chapter 5, and I write 5, 6, and 7. Then I write 5, and so I just, it's kind of like a frog hopping
Process.
out till I get to the ending. But roughly, I know that it's going to be a 20 chapter book, but eventually becomes 25 chapters. I know it's going to be a 16 chapter book, eventually becomes 17 or 18 or becomes 14 chapters. So for both books and even for my short stories, it's always about bullet points. Bullet points. So I've written it in my head, then the journey of actually discovering the writing. Yeah, but the thing about writing is the work is not in writing, the work is in the editing because it can be very difficult
Yes.
deleting
Yes.
work based on the advice of an editor. It can be very difficult redrafting. And
Yeah.
I've never suffered redrafting. I've never gone through overhauling a story. Apart from, I think, for Fine Boys, I had to merge several characters because seeing as it was a pastiche of real life, in real life, you have multiple people who are best friend over your life. But in fiction, no, you will have one. So it was basically merging the character who was best friend in primary school, best friend in secondary school, best friend in university, and best friend that got killed. It was merging, of course, people are a bit more promiscuous in real life, merging the girlfriend in year 1 with the girlfriend in year 2 and the girlfriend in year 3, so they become one character. so, so that was what, so it was basically in terms of from writing from real life into creating fiction. It was things like that. There was something that Chimamanda read an early draft and gave me notes and said that the as the novel went on, it became better, it was smoother. But at the early parts were a bit clunky and she didn't get it, and I need to turn smoothing them. That she felt that the later parts were based on real life and the early parts was based on fiction. And I thought actually it was the other way around, that I tried to keep close to what really happened with the clunky bits. Because real life doesn't follow a plot. And the part
Yeah.
where I was making shit up, when I was making it up, that's when it actually really flowed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. Wow. So interesting. Okay. So then you got into publishing. So then where does narrative landscapes come into the picture, and
Oh
how
yeah.
did you understand
Oh,
yourself as a publisher? So when did that table turn?
okay, so I left medicine not for writing. That was an oversimplification. So my dad got ill in 2010, and
Okay.
I had to go and run the bank, the family
Oh, okay.
business, and so I became the MD of a mortgage bank for a few years. Then my dad got better in 2012, 2013. Then, as first sons and fathers are wont to do, we had a big argument and I walked away. And so I was about to go back to medicine. I was about to go and dust up the medical books when my publisher, by then I was already published, my both novels were out. So Mukhtar Bakari, who discovered me, finally said, Eghosa, so I need somebody to help me run Kachifua. Can you help me run it? And I said, oh, sure. That's a lovely experiment. Let's see. So I ran I ran the people who published me, I ran my publisher.
Okay.
I ran it up until 2016. Then I kind of outgrew it. And so me and one of my editors at the time, Anwuli Ojogu, who you would have met. So she now came to me with this idea that she wanted to set up a publishing services company where we had no money at all. I was still fighting with my dad and I didn't want to go to him for money. So we had about equivalent to $1,000 that we had to cobble from everywhere. And we started this company where we would offer the skills that we had learned, editing, design, print, project management, logistics, to other publishers, to individual writers, to vanity writers, and all that jazz. And that's how Native Landscape Press started as a publishing services company. But I
Oh,
told her at the
wow.
time in 2016 that eventually we were going to be traditional publishers. She wasn't that keen. I said, but eventually we will have to do it.
Yeah.
So we built up a war chest over the years. Then in 2018, we eventually published our first traditionally published books, which was when we acquired the rights for all of Chimamanda's books.
Okay.
Yeah, so Chimamanda came and joined us as our first author. Although we had published other authors before them, but they paid for us. They were
Sure.
self-published, even though they
Sure.
used our imprint. Then we now, so from there, that's so our real journey to traditional publishing started in 2018. We opened our submissions desk, and we started doing our own work. Both
Nice.
acquiring regional rights
Uh-huh.
and acquiring and also discovering authors on our own. Yeah, but the first book that we've published completely on our own from I don't know if the mirror image will show, but I will send you a
Yes.
picture. So this is Truth is a Flightless Bird.
Yes.
But yeah, that's how it started. That's how we were able to do this journey, and that's how. So Night Landscape Press was always eventually the ending of our journey was always going to be owning a printing press. That's what
Okay.
we are going to. As because like I said, it was always about owning production. Instead of having to print in South Asia, we need to be able to produce here.
Yeah.
It's taking longer than we expect, but it has always been a dream to own not a small corner press, but something really massive that can do massive work and scale, by bringing prices down. Yeah.
So in the building you're in, there's a press there.
Yes, exactly. In the name, there's a press pen. Yes, exactly. Although people now think about printers. We have to say no, we're not printers. We work with printers because
Yes.
printers they're like tailors. The day they see your
Yes.
cloth to be ready, their telephone will be off that day. You cannot contact them. So we normally tell you that no, 2 weeks is lying. It's going to be 3.5 weeks. So
Yeah,
so we stand in the bridge
exactly.
between our clients and printers. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, we met on a panel that your partner was on about the future of books and publishing in Africa and where that's going. And listeners, again, this is, I think, my second interview with someone from the Peja Festival. So that's where we met in here in
Yeah.
Ghana. And so just kind of expanding on that concept, and thinking about where we're going with actual paper, because I am actually a believer that our education system needs paper, to some extent. I think that children need libraries to some extent. I mean, particularly given that we're in this gap space where we haven't solved for infrastructure totally, and we have masses that don't have access to this future technology. So I'm all for future technology, but I think that there is a place that remains for the written word on a paper. So with that in mind, and thinking about where and how vast you can go, and where other you're in the book publishing, but are textbooks something you're thinking about? Like how do you think about the future of the landscape press?
Yes, we released our first textbooks this year but they came too late, so we're going to roll them out by over the next few months against next year's session because textbooks are seasonal. You aim for September.
Yes.
And so yeah, but we went with civics and social studies because our strategy was always to go with the I can't compete with Macmillan or books like that for maths and science, but I know I can write a very good social studies books because I know my politics and I know the things I
Sure.
want to say, and I know I
Yeah.
can domesticate it here. So we went with that. We're thinking of a French textbook next because our big country syndrome. We're surrounded by francophone, and we are really bad at French. It's been
So
in our
terrible.
policy that Nigeria should strive towards being to be bilingual in the European languages. But God, we went through
Yeah.
it as children. I don't know if you guys suffered it. So it was just Je m'appelle, comment tu t'appelles too? Je m'appelle. That is where we let it. Then I realized there was on yeah, exactly. That was all. So we're working on a French textbook. So yeah, with paper and the capacity for electronic publishing as a way to try and do accessible publishing. There's this concept of accessible publishing now, which is mostly for sight impaired and reading impaired, reading disabled individuals. But even us, we're thinking that, like Anwuli would have said on the panel, I think that was our company's position at the panel was that you needed to, yeah, you could dream and get all that done, but the people that you needed to read the books did not have the devices
Yeah.
that
Exactly.
you are talking about. They don't have the device, and the devices need power. So while electronic reading and the rest will work in a system, books still need to be in the hands of kids.
Yeah.
And while we can praise the donating of secondhand books from overseas, we also still need to develop the capacity to produce our stories here, no matter how
Yes.
cheaply, no matter if it's on paper that's like tissue paper. just produce it and make it as
Sure.
cheap as possible, make it as discardable as possible. The child will definitely not look at that book past 2 or 3 years. Recycle the paper, goes into the system, a new book is produced. I've always believed that while without prejudice to those who are working in the ebook field or in and audiobooks and all those spaces, I'm a fan of audiobooks myself because I can only do so many things at a
Yeah.
time. I sincerely and strongly believe that production of the printed book, of the book itself, as cheaply as possible, as widely distributed as possible, is still the answer. I believe that you don't need to force a child to read. Just have books in the house. One day will be bored enough to pick one up.
Yes, it's
That
true.
that
It's true.
that's what I've always. Although now I'm finding it difficult to explain that my optimism because I have twins, and there's a book and the tablet wins every time. But I think
I
the wife has
know.
started shutting down the tablet, so they normally sit down twiddling their thumbs, and we're like, look at that shelf, it is full. Pick one, Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's the way. That's the way. So, speaking of thinking about things and mindset, let's talk about a mindset hack. So, what is your favorite or an innovative mindset hack? So, this is one that you can imagine, one that you know of, or one that you practice.
Oh no, for me it's one empathy. But in practice, I put myself in the person's shoes. So if
Yes.
somebody and that's really important. So if somebody gives me a job to do and I've been too lazy, I imagine their disappointment when I fail, and that kind of helps me get. I think that's it for me. I imagine how I look to others, so that can have a paralyzing effect of being too aware of what people think of you. And I think that's also my weakness, but I'm really, really aware. And
Yeah.
it also saves me in writing. So, for example, I develop a massive inferiority complex about my writing, not enough to paralyze it, but enough to be ashamed of it if it's bad. Then I go back and I try to make it better. I try to make it better. So for me, it's always about it's related to seeing how people see me, putting myself in their shoes. Will I disappoint them? Okay, they're going to mess this up now because that person will laugh at you, and that now tries to make me So I think that's my hack for changing my mindset about anything. Empathy and projection. Put myself in the other person's shoes.
What is it? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, those are good ones. Yeah, that's a definite way to approach life in a
It's very
humanistic way.
unhealthy.
Let's put it that way.
It is very unhealthy.
But
It's extremely
I
unhealthy,
mean,
but it works.
yeah, yeah. The empathy piece is the real piece that I think is what
Yeah.
is carrying you through, is because you've have a consciousness about the other, and I think that is something that, like I said, humans, we need to see each other in a much
Yeah.
broader way.
Because I envy those who don't GAF. They're so lucky.
Right.
Yeah, they don't.
They just
They
go
have
for
it
whatever.
easy. Just go
Yeah.
for whatever. I can't.
Yeah. Well, there's a place for all of us, obviously, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Let's turn to the you that is not the publisher or the writer. In your spare time, how do you? I'm sure you read a lot, so I'm not sure. I'm sure you probably may not read too much, but I like to ask the question: when you're not in this business self, are you a reader, a watcher, or are you a listener? And what are some of your favorite? Probably more so watches or listens, but if reading, there's some
So
some
no,
new tips you can add. That would be great.
reading doesn't happen because of publishing. Yeah, there's no
Okay.
time. It's very painful.
Yeah,
I can't
I'm
stand the written
sure.
word. I'm sick of it. So most times I used to steal audiobooks from those sites where we used to get free films. I would go instead of getting the films, I would go for the
Oh,
audiobooks.
okay.
Yeah, but I think the
Okay. Okay.
Americans
Okay.
finally destroyed the last of them Pirate Bay about a decade ago. So she knows what I'm talking about. We're all criminals. So
I do.
and then the justification was that they will not take Naira. You can't even buy them if you're in Africa. But they said it's a lie, you can pay for them now. It is not true anymore.
Oh, okay.
So I have an Audible account and I listen to audiobook. Yeah, so I listen to audiobooks a lot. Then I've always been a video game nerd, so I still play. That's to relax, to
Okay.
decompress. Then I've always then I watch films. I've always been one for fantasy. That has always been my first love. Very well told fantasy and speculative fiction, and that is what I still, especially if mainstream stories cross over, or if speculative fiction crosses over into mainstream, either in audiobook format or and Netflix has Amazon Prime, Netflix, Disney Plus, with the way the Star Wars stories are being retold. And of course, there's a lot of bad work, but there's some good work going on there. There's this new Andor, about Cassian Andor, this character that was created for Rogue One, this Star Wars prequel. And they had this series that just finished a 13 episode arc first season. That is the best Star Wars story ever told. It is what everybody had hoped that the prequels would become.
That's Disney Plus, right?
Disney Plus, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm able to get Disney Plus in Lagos because of, thank God for VPN. But yeah, so it's those kind of things that I watch. Yeah. So that's what I mostly watch when I want to take my eyes off the printed page and I want to become a passive enjoyer. Because with literature, literature demands as much from its consumer as it does from its writer, from its creator. That's what poetry, the printed book does. And there's a joke I always crack to my friends who know this. I'm dyslexic when it comes to poetry. I can't see it on the page, but if it's read to me, I get it. But I've never been able to understand. So why did the line break here? They'll say no, because it's penta. I say pent. I can't count it. I can't dance. Maybe that's right. I don't get really wanted. Yeah. So for me, it's always about. And I think that's also informed my writing style, where it's very evocative of storytelling. So I try to write where I speak. I try to learn when to put a comma, when to play with a quick cadence of words and slow it down and bring you back, without using things like however, thereafter. I hate those words, but just using the language itself to do that. It's always been a very important thing for me. Yeah, so for me, it's passive entertainment when I'm relaxing. It's audiobooks.
Sure. Yeah.
Film. The only active entertainment I do is playing FIFA, which my wife hates. Yeah, because it doesn't let me. I can be, and since the pandemic, I've not had any play partner, somebody that would come and visit. I think most of them have gone. All the other people who are playing, they are too young. So all the 40-something-year-old FIFA players, they've all traveled overseas. No more old men playing FIFA.
Oh, that's funny. And fun. Oh, that's great. So we'll have some of that in our show notes. And this has been so great. I love this conversation. I would love to continue. And I know you have home to get to, I'd love to continue some other time, actually, just talking more about writing and authors and all of those things. So be on the lookout for a call from me about that. So before we sign off, can you share any final words or thoughts with our audience today?
Yeah, just tell your stories. It's a lot easier than we make it seem. We make it hard so you don't come and steal our jobs. Just tell the story. You are children of this world. The greatest invention that humanity ever made was not the wheel. It wasn't the concept of zero. It was the sentence. Correlation. It was causation. Subject, verb, object. That is the greatest tool we have, the tool of language and the sentence. And with that, you can do so much more. You can do anything you want to do with it. Play with it and find that space and luxuriate, glorify it. It's a beautiful space to be.
Nice. That is poetic, quite honestly.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
I'm dyslexic in poetry. I can't read it.
Spoken words. That's what they're meant to be. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, folks, this has been another episode of the podcast. You can catch us Tuesdays with new episodes at glocalcitizenspod.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to like, share, write a review. It helps people find great content online. And until next time, bye for now.